everybody. Welcome to our Fireside chat with Dave Anthony, who is the CEO of Deviation Games. He is coming to us from a swanky hotel in Monaco, and I'm in my basement in Vancouver. And we're going to, with the wonders and power of technology, we're going to have a great conversation. Dave Anthony has had an incredible career in video games. I want to get right into that, Dave. First of all, thank you for joining us here at XDS. You are a fascinating individual with lots of really cool perspective, and I know our audience is going to love hearing from you. But I want to talk about the beginnings, the start of Dave Anthony's origin story. Your career began in England. Talk to me about video games and what it was. What was the pull there? Why did you want to make video games?
You know, Victor, it was really, I got really lucky, actually, I have to say. I was actually a victim of having no talent. So what happened was all I could do was play video games, which, you know, if you live in England, pretty much all it does is rain. So you can either go to the pub or you can play video games. And because I wasn't quite of legal drinking age, I chose to play video games. And my mom would always say, be like, David, you're never going to learn anything playing video games. And I was like, no, I love this stuff. And eventually I ended up getting a job testing video games, a company called Psygnosis, which back in the day in England.
Amazing company.
Like,
amazing.
Those are the rock stars.
Yes.
And just to land a job testing video games there, which I have to thank my brother for, because he gave me the opportunity to do that, because he was actually working there at the time. I just thought I'd won the lottery. So because I've had this incredible bout of good fortune, I thought I'd do something cheeky. And I went to one of the directors of the company there, Ian Grieve, who's a really good friend. And I said to him, look, I said, I'd love to make you a game. And I said, I'll make it for free. Just give me the opportunity. Just look at it if I do you a demo, because I'd taught myself how to program on the Commodore Amiga.
Yeah.
And so I put this demo together, and it was pretty terrible, to be honest. But Ian gave me my break and gave me a shot. And in the end, they actually ended up paying me to do the game. And it was a game called Theatre of Death on the Amiga, which, funnily enough, was kind of like a really poor man's version of Call of Duty, which I ultimately ended up working on. And so I was 18 years old, Victor. Honestly, I was just a naive kid. I had no idea what I was doing. I was making this video game. I was trying to, study my degree and getting drunk every day at university, obviously, as everybody does. And I'm like, how's all this going to work? But somehow I managed to get it done. And then that was my first game.
I love it, man. It strikes me that we may be, the largest generation of people that grew up to prove our mothers and fathers wrong about their predictions that video games were going to lead to nothing. But I feel like that's such a common theme. That's what my mom was saying. All of our video games are going to lead to nothing. It's like, well, yeah, actually, we're going to do okay.
Turns out they actually do pretty well. So.
That's wild. So how long were you at Psygnosis?
I worked there as a games tester for 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And that was just an incredible time in my life. And I realized that after about a month, wasn't quite as incredible after a month as I thought it would be. You're just playing. You're like, I'm going to get a job testing video games, and I'm just going to be playing games all day. It's fantastic. But what you're actually doing is you're playing the same game over and over and over again.
Yes, trying to break it.
Get sick of it. But it was really cool.
Hats off to all of the QA testers in the audience and all of the companies that work in QA. You do God's work, right? I mean, such necessary components of the video game business.
But I'll tell you, Victor, honestly, I've spoken to so many people in this industry who are really successful. Mm-hmm. They all started in QA.
Right.
That's how they got their breaks. And it's really fascinating, because when you're in QA, you get to speak to all the different departments of people who make the games.
Right.
So it's really, really cool. And you get to learn a lot of stuff. And I think maybe that inspires people and gives them confidence that, they can understand how to make games and things like that. And it's really amazing. QA is a great way, even today, to get into the video game space.
So for 3 months you were a QA tester, though. That's
Yes.
like a land speed record, and then you convinced Ian to let you go forward and build your own game.
That's right. And the game got released. We released it on the Commodore Amiga and the PC. And I believe on the PC it even got to #1 in the charts at one point,
Wow.
which was just completely nuts. Because I'm just this like dumb kid from Liverpool, and somehow managed to get this thing done.
That's incredible.
And it was a pretty amazing story. And then, of course, I'm all full of confidence and enthusiasm after doing that. So I then start my second game, which was the absolute biggest complete disaster you could imagine. Because I'm like, oh, I can do anything I want now. I'm all confident, no idea about actually how to make something on a big scale. And I came up with this game idea. It was called Fallen, and God bless Ian Hetherington from Psygnosis, and I feel bad about this game to this day because he put his faith in me to make this game, and the concept was really cool. It's like Grand Theft Auto on steroids, but this was 30 years ago, and the technology couldn't handle it and everything else. But I was so sort of enthusiastic, I kind of just didn't even realize. And I worked on that project for about 3 years, and it ended up in a complete disaster. And that was a really good experience for me in the end, because Victor, I genuinely believe this, that you learn the best lessons in life through failure. And because you don't forget that stuff, particularly when there are people that have invested in you and put their faith in you and it doesn't work out. You
were in your early 20s at that point, I would imagine.
Yeah,
right?
I was like, I think when that whole thing imploded, I was probably like 23 or 24 or something.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible age to learn something like that, because there are lots of rocket careers out there where people are quite young and they
absolutely
they have success, and then the failure comes or something changes and they just don't have the tools to deal with it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I was definitely in that camp, and I had no idea about anything. I grew up in a relatively poor family, and I knew nothing about money or anything like that. In fact, I think when I earned my first money, I just blew it all on a sports car.
Of course.
So I went from having no money to having, I think, about 20 grand or something, and then the next day I had nothing again, and I had a sports car sat outside the house. But I was happy as a clam.
And no money for gas. I love it.
Exactly. Gas goes on the credit card. And that's it. Can't pay it off.
So did Psygnosis say, thank you, Dave, goodbye? Or were you able to stay there?
They were very gracious, and they actually offered me a job at the end of it, which I really appreciated. Yeah. And, I worked there for like a year or two, I think. And then, the journey went on. And at this point, I had, while I was actually making the disastrous game, the one positive thing to come out of it was I formed a relationship with a gentleman called Jason Blundell, who is my partner in Deviation Games today.
Right on.
And he's been a lifelong, almost best friend, because I think he was 16 when I gave him his first job in the industry at this company. And I could see this kid, he's just so smart and so enthusiastic. And I was just like, oh my God, it's incredible. And we formed a great friendship. And we've been working together almost ever since.
That's incredible.
And the day when we set up Deviation Games, and he agreed to come on this journey. It was incredible. It was just like, it's like we used to sit as kids back then, and we were sitting there with our feet outside the window, just laying down thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if one day we had our own company together? And here we are. Fantastic.
That's wild. But this isn't your first go round running your own company, because after Psygnosis, you built your own game company, right? What was it called?
That's right. That's right. It's called Gene Pool Software.
Okay.
And that's when we started making games for Activision. And so we were making games, and then we made our first game, which was an X-Men game. And then we started making our second one, which was an Iron Man game. And, everybody these days obviously thinks of Iron Man as this like huge, massive franchise.
Yes.
Back then, it's like very, very niche. Like a lot of people didn't know what it was. But back then, when we started making that game, Tom Cruise, I believe, was actually supposed to be starring as Iron Man.
That's right.
And then that whole deal, we're sort of, I think we're about 6 months in on the project, and the whole deal with Tom fell through. And then suddenly there's all this uncertainty around the project. And it's like, oh my God. And then I get a phone call from Activision, and the whole project's cancelled.
Oh, wow.
And we had the best, the first game we'd done, honestly, the X-Men game, it had some problems. We did our best, but, it could have been better. The prototype we had for Iron Man was really good.
Oh,
and
man.
When I got that phone call, Jason was in the room actually when I got it. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is crazy. But sounds like a sad story. But then what came out of that was a new relationship with Activision, where Activision was like, we really love you guys. And we've got this fantastic game called Call of Duty, which I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
And they said, we're doing the game on the console for the first time. It needs a little bit of help. And they said, would some of your guys like to come over and help out? And we came over, and it was true. It did need a little bit of help. And they were parachuting people in from all over the world to work on this thing.
Building an army to make an army game.
Yeah, but Activision is smart. They know how to ship games, and they know what it takes to make them, and they'll do whatever it takes.
And this was the very first Call of Duty game, right? The very first one that
I think it was the PlayStation 2. I think there'd been the Call of Duty game had been on the PC by the company Infinity Ward before that, but
right.
Yeah, this was the first one on the PlayStation 2, which Infinity Ward were not involved in.
That's
right. It wasn't going well, and but eventually, you know what? We worked really hard on that. A lot of smart people, a lot of which were still friends today, having gone through that sort of war story experience of getting it done. Formed some fantastic relationships. That's actually where I formed the relationship with Mark Lamia, who was my partner at Treyarch for 10 years.
Yes.
And we're great friends still to this day. He's an amazing guy. And
wow, an incredible studio. Like the library of titles that have come out of Treyarch is just phenomenal.
Oh, crazy. I mean, I joined Treyarch, I think it was in 2005. We just merged with a studio called Grey Matter. And Mark actually wasn't working there at the time. He was still the head of the shooter business at Activision. Mm-hmm. And, I could see the studio had so much potential.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where it has the potential, but we need to really build it into a AAA team, because, we had this cycle where Infinity Ward, which is absolutely fantastic developer, was working on the Call of Duty games.
Yes.
And had originated the franchise. And we were sort of the B team, working on this franchise and constantly in their shadow. And I'm like, Jesus, I've got to try and take the studio and compete with Infinity Ward, who is, those guys were like gods at the time. It was like,
sure they were.
They're making such brilliant games. But eventually, we grew, and then Treyarch created the Black Ops franchise, of which I was the game director, and the rest is history.
That's incredible. And you carved out it's interesting because Treyarch has had a bunch of, personalities, it feels like a lot of different ways to distinguish itself. It was the Spider-Man team for a while.
That's right.
It was Call of Duty Splinter team, but Black Ops, I think, really put the flag in the ground. Everybody knew Treyarch now as the Black Ops studio. Was that something that you cultivated? Is that something that you could predict, or did it just happen based on the tangential success? This it's not accidental. It was crafted, but Black Ops was a very different experience than Modern Warfare.
You know, Victor, I'd love to say I sat there like a mastermind and planned the whole thing.
You can say that.
Absolutely not. It was, you know, the team just kept growing and growing, and you know, we became confident. We actually gained our confidence. It was actually on Call of Duty World at War, which was the game before that, right. Which is still one of my favorites developments to this day. I love that game, and that was the.
I also want to give a shout out to Big Red One, because that was such a cool idea. That was an awesome concept. We actually, our production company, worked with the military channel and visited Treyarch and did a whole behind the scenes special around it. And I just love the storytelling of the Big Red One, focusing on the first America's first infantry division, and it was and you had the vets all in there. It was really remarkable, and it really gave me a firsthand look at how much effort goes into, and this was PS2 days, and I know things have just ramped up like crazy since then. But yeah, Treyarch's a remarkable studio.
It's funny you mentioned Big Red One, because like I mentioned before, you know, we had this thing with Infinity Ward and being sort of in their shadow, and rightly so, because they're so good. Yeah. But on Big Red One, you know, we explored, we made it, it was a very personal story. Yes. You know, the characters were really cool, and that was sort of, I guess, the genesis of how ultimately we ended up with something like Black Ops, because Black Ops is a character piece. Yeah, you know, it's a story game. Cold War. It is, and it, you know, it's set with the background of, you know, Vietnam and everything else, but it's not a story about Vietnam or the Cold War. It's actually a story about that group of guys and what happened to them.
And that must have been a bit of an epiphany, because the, you know, what Call of Duty was starting to become known for is the madness of war and the epic scale of war. But you guys really focused on individuals and got us to care about these characters.
No, absolutely. And I can tell you what, Victor, the more you actually speak to people who have been in these wars, the more you realize that those are the stories you have to tell. Yeah. Because there are things that happen and that they've been through, experiences that they've had, that just, like, it's almost incomprehensible in terms of the suffering and the sacrifice.
You told me last time we talked, and I'd like you to share it with the audience here, that, you know, obviously through Call of Duty, there's a lot of outreach into the world of the military and cooperation with the world of the military. Has there been some profound moments and some profound kind of realizations for you about the impact of your games?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'd love to share on it, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. It's when I was doing World at War, you know, we got to the end of it, and we speak to people, and they tell us how it, you know, impacts their lives and things like that. And we kind of like, well, we're just making video games, you know. It is what it is. It's fun and everything, but does it really, like, change people's lives? And I learned about a father who he used World at War to stay in regular communication with his son, who was deployed in the military and was fighting in the conflict at the time. And that's how he connected with him. He didn't call him on the phone. He played Call of Duty World at War with him. Right. And he placed a box of Call of Duty World at War on his grave when he died. Wow. And there was just a note on it saying, "I'll see you online."
Oh, man.
And I looked at game development in a very different way ever since that moment. Right. Amazing. And sorry, I'm joking up a little bit there.
This is your life. I mean, that's the thing about it, right? Like, it's not just making this entertainment and watching it. It's the power of games too. And I think that people outside of games don't always understand it, but you're with an audience that does.
They don't. We, to be fair, we didn't even understand making the game. It's like,
Yeah.
but then you start talking to people. On Black Ops 2, I hired Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North to create the story with him, because we were doing a lot of stuff in the 80s in
Right.
Nicaragua and Panama, where he was very
so wild,
very heavily involved.
Yes.
Which at the time, it just blew my mind. Oh my God, I'm actually sat in a room creating a story with Oliver North. I mean, it's just mind blowing.
Yes.
But he told me, like, he spends a lot of time on the bases in Afghanistan and Iraq. And he told me, he said, Dave, he said, you just don't realize that this game is actually saving people's lives.
Mm.
Because they even use it to train for situational awareness.
Right.
Which we wouldn't even thought of that in a million years.
Yeah.
But these guys, some of these guys, before they go on a mission, they'll play the game.
Yeah.
And
it's wild.
It's things like that it really, I remember, sat, in early 1990, 91, in my bedroom making video games, and then it becomes something like that. Like, it's hard to get your head around.
It's really incredible. I had the chance to interview a guy named Peter Singer, who works with the military. Yeah. And do you know
I hired him on Black Ops 2.
Well, because we interviewed him. I think what happened is we interviewed him for Metal Gear Solid 4 for the making of that. And I don't know if that was his entree into the video game scene, but he's a wonderful guy. I just found him on the internet. I was like, who's going to know? Because, Kojima is always about, automated soldiers and all that stuff, and the industrialization of the military. And he has lots of epiphany there. But it's interesting that I think we're going from games as a way to train real life combatants and all of that AI that's going into video games. There's going to be some kind of, entree into that actually hitting the back. It's not hard to predict that a lot of that learning is going to actually be out on the battlefields. It already kind of is in a way, isn't it?
It's absolutely true. And they use this for training all the time. And you look on the training simulators, and guess what they use for the simulators? They use video game controllers.
Right.
Because they know that that's how people are brought up now, and how they think, and how their reaction times are done. And a lot of.
I want to get into what's going on with Deviation, because this is a rabbit hole that we could go on forever. But you're on the biggest brand in games, and you say that's enough, I'm out. First of all, what precipitates? Like, how do you do that, and why would you do that? And then what brings you to Deviation? It
was tough. I was very, very blessed to work on Call of Duty, and Activision treated me really, really well. I had just reached the point where, when you work on a huge franchise like that, as it becomes more and more successful, more and more limits get imposed on it creatively. Yeah. For very understandable reasons, actually. Because you don't want to change it too much, because if you change it too much, people might not like it anymore, and it might not make as much money. And, there's a lot of concern about that. Yeah. But, I just reached a stage in my career where all I wanted to do was work on groundbreaking stuff. Sure. And innovative stuff. And I didn't have an opportunity to do that. So I decided actually to leave the industry for a few years. And I literally didn't do anything.
And how important is that as somebody that's been doing this? It's important, I would imagine. Yes. I haven't gotten to that stage in my career yet, but
trust me, I had been on the hamster wheel since 1991.
Yeah.
Working regularly 6-7 days a week without any break, and then just lurching from one project to the next. And I actually needed that break. Sure. And I think it's a really important thing that companies should focus on. Right. Who are employing people. Yeah. That if, you should give people a really extended break after a certain number of years, working on a certain thing. Because it's actually, ultimately, you'll end up with somebody more productive. And those few years out, Victor, like, it just changed my perspective on everything. So then for Deviation Games, I was ready and raring to sort of come back. And it's a long story, but I mean, the short version is, I wanted to basically create a game where it's just innovation and quality from the ground up. And I was uncompromising on that. And I ended up, the only way I knew I could do that was seeking private investment for our company.
Right.
I knew if I had complete financial security on day one, I can actually do whatever I want. And that's what happened. And since then, I've had the honor of being able to build the greatest team and talent density I have ever seen. And props to Christy Stoll, who has built our entire studio without using a single employment agency, which I think it's one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in my career. We have Deviation now, we're like 130 people plus, greatest talent density I've ever seen. And Jason and I, we talk about this all the time. It's like, my God, it's like, how did this actually happen? And we look back during a global pandemic.
I know. Well,
right?
What was cool at the Summer Game Fest with Jeff, you got up on stage and announced that you're in an exclusive arrangement with PlayStation, and they are a massive partner of yours. And we don't know anything. The world doesn't know anything about what you guys are doing, and it's a huge announcement, but it's so mysterious. I love it.
Well, Victor, let me tell you exactly what the game design is right now. Sorry, not Cody. We are, listen, here's what I can tell you. We've actually been working on this game for almost 18 months. And the ambition is incredible. The scope of the game is incredible. And everything we're building here, our goal is, games now, it's all about social interaction.
Yeah.
And everything we're doing and building is rooted in that from the ground up.
Mm.
It's about incentivizing, you and your sort of tribe of friends to come together and have a great experience. And it's all designed around player motivations and rising trends in the industry, actually.
Right.
And we've designed the core of this game from the ground up. And also, I can tell you that the technology behind the game is quite groundbreaking. And I can't really say any more about that because I'll get shot by Sony. Probably already will, actually. Sorry, Herman. But,
well,
no, Sony, honestly, Sony have been a fantastic supporter. Herman Holst particularly has been really, really amazing. And it's totally clear to me how they make such high quality games now.
They are crazy.
I knew it.
I just did my top 10 list of 2021 so far, and they have 3 of the games on there. Yeah. It's like, what the hell? It's incredible.
It's undeniable, and that's why I chose them as a partner. Is because it's just you can't touch that track record, and it's such a pleasure to work with them. But for me, it's, the deal is great with Sony. What I'm proud about is my team at Deviation Games, and we call our people, Victor, deviators.
I love it.
That's our mission. Our mission is to deviate from the norm, so that when this game comes out, you're going to be like, I've never seen anything like this before. And I'm so proud of the team. And they're just an incredible bunch of people. And it's not just the team, it's the culture of the studio, actually.
Yeah.
Which is really, really unique, I think, in this industry.
Well, it can only come from the ingredients of, rising through all of these ranks that you have, all of this experience. And I think that integral break and reaching out into the financial community and, like, at the top level, the publishing community, and sort of concocting this really unique cocktail that you have with your studio. It's incredibly impressive to see. And, all of this buzz before we have seen one frame of what the hell you're working on. It's really, all of it is a remarkable story. Congrats, man.
Well, thank you, Victor. I really appreciate it. It's for Jason and I, we don't look at what we're doing as a game or even a franchise or anything like that. This game with Sony is going to be a legacy.
That's great.
This is the thing we're going to look back on and be like, to our kids, Yeah, we did that. And look at the team of deviators that did it. Amazing.
That's great. Well, I know we have, we're going to get a lot of questions for you. I have to share you with the crowd right now. We are moving over to the XDS Networking Hub, which is presented by Room 8. It's if it's not already in your calendar, go to the homepage of XDS Connect, scroll down to current session and select view session to join our Q&A right now. And then, of course, don't forget to press the big play button in the center of the screen. Dave and I are going to be right back. All right, we are back with Dave Anthony for the live Q&A, and thank you so much for joining us here in the XDS Networking Hub. I've got one question, and then I'm going to start going to the crowd here. What are some of the key things that you look for when you're contracting an external development studio?
So it's a really great question, because things have changed so much. It used to be, when I started making games, you'd actually literally do it all yourself, literally everything, sound, artwork, everything else.
Yes.
And then it's grown. So it's like you start building the teams, and then it's like the team does everything itself. And then suddenly the games get so big, it's like, well, we could maybe think about, using somebody externally. And now it's like, we can't make a game without using a whole host of, at least a huge, a big AAA game, without using a huge host of externals. So to me, what you're looking for is you need consistency in the quality of the assets of what the team is making. And you have to look at the pipeline of how that's done. Because it's not, at least for us, it's never been as simple as, you can just use an external company and then the assets are going to come back perfectly, and then you just plop them in the game and then that's it.
Right.
You need to figure out like a symbiosis between the people you're working with of what is the pipeline here? What is the quality control and procedure that you use? So to me, when I'm looking for external companies to work with, it's an appetite for that process of, are they willing and open to a quality control process that delivers the best possible result?
Awesome. This one is from Junie, asking, you indicate that you may never have had a team with talent density this high. Can you describe how your values, your culture, and hiring and retention practices have contributed to this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can tell you, first of all, our culture is all built around one central idea, which is we don't tolerate ego in any way, shape, or form. We have a zero tolerance policy on it. So our attitude is be humble. And we literally, if you go onto our website, you'll actually see our 5 core values, one of which says, be humble, check your ego at the door, and then collect it when you leave.
Right.
And that made great sense when we actually had an office.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't make any sense at all. But
yeah, how can you have an ego if you're in your bathrobe on a Zoom call, right?
It's so true. But let me tell you some of our other core values. It's like we call ourselves Deviation, right?
Yeah.
But Deviation's not a company; it's an attitude, and that's what we talk to our people about all the time. And it's also things like love what you do and have fun making it at the same time. Challenge every single assumption you have. I always have this idea, I call it the theory of the opposite, which I use all the time. And it's like, whenever I think I've got the idea, I immediately think of the complete opposite, no matter what it is. And it sparks so many interesting ideas. And again, that's, drilling into the concept of deviation.
Right.
And as my partner Jason likes to say, our final one is there's no fear in this dojo, because he's a big Karate Kid fan.
Sure.
So, but that's how we operate. It's a fearless environment for creativity, and that's why we set the studio up. Actually,
Cobra Kai game confirmed.
Exactly.
is that what it is? It's a Cobra Kai game.
Oh, no,
right? No.
The cat's out of the bag now. Somebody's going to kill me.
I love that there's no fear in the dojo. I love that.
So,
So how do all of those core tenets though, practically come together, especially during a pandemic?
yeah, I mean, during the pandemic, it's been really interesting actually, because the whole social fabric has just completely been turned on its head,
Mm-hmm.
almost overnight. But one of the things that we've realized, and something I would never have done, um, even like 18 months ago, is,
Yeah.
and it's funny because it kind of aligns with the concept of outsourcing, is that, like, to give an example, an engineering team, right? I would always have in my mind, well, the engineers have to be on site and they have to be with the team. And there's no other way it can be done.
Right.
What we're realizing now, through this situation with COVID that's been forced upon us, it's actually given us some great realizations, which is that some engineers, now not all of them to be fair, but some of them can be more efficient remotely, actually communicate better remotely, and are less distracted and more productive. And it's absolutely amazing. So we're now sort of, building our teams. We have engineering leadership full-time remote now, which
Right.
18 months ago I would never have imagined.
Yeah, it's really, we don't know it yet, do we? We don't know how much this changes work forever.
No,
we don't know it yet. Yeah.
But it has changed forever. There's no going back to how it was.
I mean, dude,
no,
like Zoom could make hologram
mind.
versions of this technology, and we're going to be like the Jedi Council, like in 20 years, we'll have little versions of us sort of beamed to offices if we want that. It's crazy.
Absolutely. That would be cool. I think there might be a business idea there, Victor. We'll talk about that later.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. Okay. This one is from Junie. I hope that was, in the direction of that's a big question that you put there. This one's from Vlad. You said that Activision was perhaps afraid that if they change the games they make, people might not buy them anymore. Do you feel this is a prevalent thing in the industry today?
Yeah, I think it is on the big franchises, honestly.
It has to be.
And it is. And it's actually understandable. I'm certainly not throwing stones at Activision. I think they make a lot of incredibly smart decisions. Yeah. And you look at the success of the Call of Duty franchise. It's almost 20 years old, and it's still one of the most successful franchises in the world. It's incredible.
Well, I was joking with TQ Jefferson yesterday, just before we rolled on our keynote, and he worked with Treyarch and at Activision too. Yeah, I don't know if you guys cross paths. But we were joking that there's probably some kind of equation how much the risk of coming up with something new on a game goes down with every person that you add to the team. Yeah, like there's a percentile of how risky they can get with a game.
Oh, absolutely. And as a franchise gets bigger, more and more people get involved. Yeah. So there's more and more fear, and all of these things that you have to contend with. And quite honestly, it's one of the reasons I left. Because I just couldn't, I could, but I just didn't want to deal with that anymore.
Sure.
But again, I understand why it happens. It's completely understandable. And the video games business is a huge business. And, I know a lot of people in the movie world. I live in Los Angeles, and, I've got to know a lot of people there. And when they understand what's going on in the video game world, and they understand how much money these games are making, and it's not just the money, though, it's how many people the games are reaching to and touching. It's like it blows their mind.
And for how long, right? Like, TV networks and production companies are happy to get people in for their 20 hours of content. That's like a, that's like a small game.
No, absolutely. And it's like, I know someone at Netflix went on record, an executive about 2 years ago, and they asked who was your biggest competitor. And they, everyone was assuming they're going to say HBO, right? They said Fortnite.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. And now they make games.
It's competition. It's competition for people's time.
Well, we have a question that's kind of related to this. And what do you think about the metaverse game or concept? And will Deviation be involved in the metaverse? And how will it change people's life? Thank you. And this one's from Sunny Yang.
What a great question, because I can tell you, everybody I speak to now, they can't say a sentence without saying the word metaverse. So like everybody is going after this thing.
Yeah.
And everybody has a different definition actually of what it means. It is absolutely the way things are going to go.
Mm.
And, you know, you look at the ultimate realization of something like the metaverse in like a movie like, well, it's obviously originally a book, but a movie like Ready Player One, where that's your sort of ultimate expression of that. A lot of people are going after this, and there's a lot of serious money being poured into this idea. Most of them will fail, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the ones who achieve that are going to be, you know, they're going to be the sort of industry leaders. And, you know,
do you think it's going to be a game company, or do you think it's going to be a tech / entertainment? Because I think Apple, like, who would have predicted that Ted Lasso is one of the things that we're from Apple is one of the things that we're all talking. Like, it just blows my mind. It's like every time I watch the show, I'm like, why? I'm watching this from Apple. It's so weird, but it's the world.
It's a great question, Victor. What's funny is tech companies have no idea how to make video games, quite honestly, despite what they might say. And video games have no idea how to do big tech. Yeah. So there is a marriage of these things coming. And I know a lot of investments have been made and deals are being done and all the rest of it. And they're trying to navigate these waters and trying to figure out what makes sense. But I think the genesis of what makes it successful will absolutely be from the video game world. Right. And, you know, my partner at Deviation, Valerie, amazing guy, he, you know, often says, like, he thinks the next Marvel will come from the video game world. Oh,
for sure.
And 100%, I have no doubt whatsoever that he's right.
I mean, Sonic the Hedgehog is the perfect example that you can, and I'm not saying that's going to be Marvel, but holy crap, was that wonderful. What a great celebration of the property.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is where it's all going to come from. The video game world is such an exciting space. I mean, look at what happened during the pandemic. Yeah. It's like, you know, it's like the worst possible thing that's happened since the financial crash, probably in 2008. Yeah. And guess what happened in both of those times? The video game business absolutely exploded. Yeah. Like, this thing is disaster proof. There could be a raging nuclear war, and then all of us video game stocks are just going to go.
Well, yeah. I mean, how else are we going to escape the real world fallout of whatever, you know, awful things are happening out there other than in video games?
No, absolutely. It's a really interesting subject because, in all seriousness, it's like, I think as time goes on, you know, I think jobs and employment is going to be harder and harder to come by for a lot of people for various reasons. Yeah. And I think you're going to see a rise of video games where it's going to be sort of play to earn. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are actually going to start earning money playing video games.
Well, they are, but it's the Wild West. But I think you're right. I mean, I'm approached all the time by different companies that want me to make content, and they'll pay me for the content. Sure. And I've been a journalist, so I don't do that kind of thing. But there are people that are doing that right now, and I think that's just going to extend out. Now, part of it is going to be discoverability, and part of it is going to be. I'm playing Deathloop right now, which is an incredible game, but it's a really hard game to convey. I don't know if you've seen it or played it, but it's a really hard game to tell somebody about, because it just sounds insane. But it's a great video game, and I think it's one that you need to watch. You need to watch somebody playing it to really understand it. Let's get into more questions here. Sure. We have. Do you have any recommendations on how teams and individuals can embrace failure as part of their learning process? Another excellent one from Junie.
Oh, please. Failure is so important. It's the thing is, the trick is, and I fell victim to this when I was young, because I actually had an ego back then, and I was like, I can't
Yeah.
fail at anything, you know.
Right. Right.
Absolutely the wrong thing to do,
Yeah.
because it's where all the valuable learning comes out of. I remember hearing J.K. Rowling, actually, the Harry Potter author. Somebody asked her one time, you know, what is the one thing you can point to for your great success? And she said failure.
Yeah.
Absolutely extraordinary. So people need to fail. And one of the things that honestly worries me a little bit these days is that I think there's becoming a rising intolerance to failure
Right.
in,
Well, we
in
live in a
certain
world of
things.
artifice, right? With social media, everybody's always got
Yeah.
their, like, they're living their best life all the time. And
Hmm.
that's not real.
That's right. And if there's any sort of whiff of, you know, failure or making a mistake in some way, people
Mm,
can get jumped on.
right.
And that promotes a fear of failure,
Right.
which I think is a terrible thing,
Right.
because failure is an act. I can tell you, as part of the creative process, it's essential.
Yeah.
Because if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough.
Right.
And it's as simple as that. It's one of the great things about working with Sony, actually, is they totally get that. Herman totally gets that. It's like,
Yeah.
it's really important because you need to push as hard as you can.
They're
And
also our most interesting stories as human beings, right? Whether it's on a
mhm,
grand scale, you know, like I don't know, a mission goes wrong, a military mission goes wrong, or
yeah,
on an individual scale, when you talk to somebody, you are automatically making yourself a human being by being able to create a portrait of yourself not succeeding in something.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually showing vulnerability, it's hard
Yeah.
to do,
Yeah.
and it takes courage. But when you do it, it's amazing the results that can come from it. Absolutely amazing.
I love it. Yeah. So let's celebrate our failures. Let's not turn away from them. I've got them, you know, like we all do. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Great
Well,
wisdom.
thanks for that question. That was a fantastic question.
Great question, Junie. Um, let's see. How do you a metaverse? Wait a sec. You said that Activision's changed the game. People prevalent indicate a talent density. Okay, I got these ones. And then Pete says, what kind of percentage of outsourcing to internals do you find you need to use? That's an interesting. What's the equation there?
Yeah, it is. I can tell you historically, actually, we have been trending towards using more outsourcing than internal. If you actually look at literally at the number of heads
Right.
of people who actually work on the project, and I think that, you know, that gap is just, it's going to get wider,
Yeah.
because um, you know, there are obviously, games cost an awful lot of money to make, and the fidelity of the assets that you need to create now to make a AAA game, at least, is quite staggering.
Yeah.
So trust me, I'm Deviation Games is in LA, which is about one of the most expensive areas to make a game in the world. And if we had to make a game in LA and not use any outsourcing, I don't think Herman would be very happy with me right now. Uh, so
Well,
it's trending. So sorry,
one
go
thing
ahead.
I've always thought about with the externals, is there a great benefit from the fact that these developers, these external developers, these teams work on so many different properties and get experience
Absolutely.
and all. And so even if I'm not talking about them using assets or, you know, tools or engines, but just the experience that they have to float from one brand to another and hit that high quality bar. That's a benefit, right?
It's fantastic. You get all the
Yeah.
learning for free by
Right.
using
Mm,
them, and
right.
we've really seen that. And they actually sometimes suggest techniques and things that we've not even considered,
Right.
and it's a really valuable part of the process.
It's true
Um,
co-development, isn't it? It's true
it is.
co-development. Yeah.
It is. And I know a lot of the outsourcing studios are wanting to be not only just perceived as co-development studios, but literally actually doing it.
Right.
And you know, we have a team in England called Equinox, a great bunch of engineers who are helping us make the game, co-developing the game with us.
That's awesome.
And it's brilliant. It's like you get so many fresh perspectives on things and different approaches. And
that time,
you know,
that time change thing must be a pretty cool thing too, right? You show up to work in the morning, and here's a whole bunch of features and notes that have been worked on. That must be a great attribute to this too.
It's fantastic.
Yeah,
very insightful point. It's like a 24-hour cycle,
sure,
right? Where the work just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And I think, I know actually that because of the pandemic, like this is just going to be like the status quo going forwards.
Right.
Like we have hired people who we would never have contemplated hiring all over the world now. I'm working fully remotely in different territories all over the world because we can now, because we don't fear it anymore like we used to. And it's opened up the talent pool in an incredible way.
I love it. We got it. Speaking of, the global talent pools out there, we have one from Mick Morris saying, "What is it about Liverpool that has spawned so many talented developers and publishers? Is Mick a friend, perhaps, from Liverpool?"
That's funny. He might be. It's the rain, honestly, and the misery of living. No, it's like, honestly, there is. It's funny. I can't get into specifics, but I'm working with people now on various things that were my best friends at school in Liverpool.
That's so great. That's amazing.
And one of them from when I was 4 years old. We sat next to each other on the same desk.
Wow.
And incredible. Just these things are Liverpool is, and England actually. England itself, great talent pool.
Totally.
So much creativity. Look at the different industries like the music industry and, all of these things. And Liverpool, obviously, particularly, with the Beatles and all that stuff is quite extraordinary. And I don't know how, I don't know if I can put my finger on one thing that makes it like that, but I really believe that a lot of great things come out of hardship and a little bit of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all over Liverpool, at least when I grew up there. So
we talked about this, and we said that there aren't that many great development studios based on Oahu or in Hawaii, right? If they can go out surfing every day, they're not making games.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think adversity really pushes people to get the best out of them. And that's a message that I push to my kids. I think I'm spectacularly failing at it, actually, but because that's spoiled rotten. But I try my best to do that and say, listen, if you're suffering a little bit, it's actually, not only is it okay, it's actually a good thing. It's good.
Yeah, no, dude, there are lots of really fantastic morsels here to chew on. Okay, this one is from Vlad at AMC Studio. If you were to give players a hint about the game you're making using a single non-confidentiality breaching word, what would it be?
Let me think about that. There might be a safe word I can use for this. Monumental.
Okay.
The word.
I love it. And then, wait a sec. I've got a couple more here. I just want to make sure I got everybody. Junie also says, how do you leverage the diversity of your team? Oh, this is excellent and pertinent to the whole theme of the summit this year. How do you leverage the diversity of your team during development?
It's a great question. And, let's be honest here. Jason, my partner, and I, we're two old fat white guys.
Yeah.
And our principal mission when we set up the studio was not to do that.
Yeah.
Because we realized that
it's not the world.
It's not.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic thing. And I think actually the video game industry particularly is a great vehicle to give diversity opportunity.
Sure.
Because it's all purely about talent. And, talent has no boundaries. It has no color or, sexuality or anything like that. If you're talented, you're talented. And that's the philosophy we have at Deviation Games. It's like, we just want the best people. We want the most enthusiastic people. And quite honestly, at Deviation Games, we want the nicest people.
Right.
Because that is our culture.
Yeah. Kindness, man. We need it.
Yeah.
We need it. Yeah.
So I have my philosophy my whole life has just been really simple. It's been work hard and be nice to people.
Yeah.
And I tell you, when I went into our first office, which was a WeWork space actually at Deviation, I'm walking into the building to assess it to see if this is somewhere where we could be. And I look to the left on the wall, I can see it right now. And there's a sign that just says work hard and be nice to people.
Right on.
Exactly the same words. And I was just like, oh my God, this is our office. And then we moved in. And then COVID happened and we moved out.
But you took the sign. Jordan Batura says, during development, are there any disciplines you believe are more beneficial scaling up internal resources for versus outsourcing and vice versa? Very specific, practical question there.
It is. It's a good question. I think engineering will always be the hardest one to outsource. Just because it requires so much communication with different facets of the team. It's not like if you are, say, an artist and you're making a model of a vehicle or something, for example. It's like it's a fairly atomic task that you can do in isolation. If you're an engineer, you're touching a lot of different things. And it has implications with the artists, with the animators and designers. But we are, having said all that, like I told you before, we have partnered with a company in England where we have a whole bunch of engineers working remotely on this thing. We have full-time engineering leadership working remotely. So there are ways to do it. But engineering, I think, is the trickiest.
Awesome. You are very familiar with the world of Hollywood, and Hollywood has been a unionized creative space for a long time. And that's a big topic in the video game business. Do you feel like we're moving towards unionization in video games? Is that an inevitability, or is that something for a far off discussion?
I think so. I think it probably will. It's hard to say, I think, when it will happen.
Yeah.
I think if it's approached in the right way, I think it would be could at least be a positive thing.
Yeah.
It is a minefield also. And if it could go two different ways. But if you go to the roots of, why people want to do unionization and you stick to those, then I think it could actually be a positive thing.
Yeah, we're seeing Activision Blizzard is going through some really heavy stuff, and as a former, that must impact you, right? It must be hard for you to see a bunch of your allies and friends and people going through times like this. Yeah,
it's difficult. I have very close attachments to people there right now, and understand what they're going through. But I think what's happening in California right now is a necessary change.
Totally.
And I think a lot of good is going to come out of it.
Yeah.
It's a shame that it has to be done in a difficult manner that but it's absolutely necessary. And it's a bit overdue. Well, long overdue, honestly. So I'm very pleased about the trend.
Me too. And I think you and I are both from an era where we got fully obsessed with video games, like all of our peers. And video games have that ability, but we, as a group of professionals in this space, we have to find work-life balance, and for future generations, so that it isn't the only thing that they have in their life is either working or playing video games, right? It's like incredibly important for us to go through these discussions right now.
No, it's absolutely right. I myself have been one of the worst you know, victims of this, I guess, because I push, like, my work ethic is just to work all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, it can be harmful.
Yep.
And one of the reasons I left when I did at Activision was also because I'd actually contracted pneumonia.
Oh,
And
wow.
I went to see my doctor. And I'd been really sick for about 4 weeks, but I'm from England, you know, I'm like, oh, I don't need to go to the doctor. It's like, what do those people know?
Yeah.
And I went to the doctor. He said, "You got pneumonia. Your lungs are full of fluid, and if you'd left it another week, you would be dead."
Oh my God.
And it's because of that what you just described. It's because
Yeah.
of the sort of de facto. This is how it is, and this is how you have to work. And that's
Yeah.
what I'd actually believed up to that point, because that's just the way I grew up. But it's wrong.
Well,
And
you know what's cool is that external development is a part of that solution, you know, and I can't think of a better way to wrap up the keynotes than to thank all the external development partners out there that are really helping this industry flourish, partnering with massive new studios like Deviation Games. Everybody, if you can join me in just giving Dave Anthony a big round of applause for being here and for helping us wrap up our keynotes at XDS21 Adapt. Dave, you're wonderful. Thank you. And I can't wait to meet you in person and have this longer chat, but also to see what you guys are working on.
absolutely. Anytime, Victor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. That's going to do it for the keynote fireside chat, but we'll be back with the XDS Wrap and Awards show from Airship Images very soon. And there's more XDS headed your way. Thank you.